Tahdon siellä tanssin kussallusti, siellä luetaan taloikielä tanssimasta, hyvää nurmia hyppimästä. Nouskamme norolle nuoret kesälinnut liikkeelle, niin me teemme kun tahamme, teemme tähän tanssipaikan, iskemme ilotupalle, riemuksemme rallatamme.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all. And first of all, thank you so much to Jenni Venäläinen and Melkutusparti Vaskivuori Upper Secondary School's dance program, and to Riina Hosio, who has made the choreography. Let's give them one more round of applause. And welcome to the World Circular Economy 2023. This forum starts now. It's really lovely to see you all, and welcome to this sunny summer hall here in Helsinki. My name is Kim Mohtonen.
And my name is Nadia Gulisov Christensen, and we're truly honored to be the moderators of this year's World Circular Economy Forum 2023. In the next 2 days, we hope to establish a shared vision for the future of circular economy. And we will set to do this by engaging the voices of future generations and by fostering the harmony of collaboration across generations. And that is what this forum is all about.
And now in today's first session, we will discover why circularity is so crucial for the well-being of our nature and our economy. We will explore new prospects for global resource use and discuss the importance of sustainable resource management for effective action on well-being, prosperity, and equality.
But before we get things started, we have a few practical things that we will share with you. Please download the event application for your device App Store and access all the essential information on the go. It also allows you to take part in polls and chat during the main events session and also to even take notes.
Are you all ready? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling good? All right. Fantastic. Now it's time to kickstart today's dialogue. Please welcome on stage the President of Sitra, Mr. Jyrki Katainen, and the Managing Director of Nordic Innovation, Mr. Svein Berg.
Wonderful. Truly great to see you both, Mr. Jyrki Katainen. The Circular Economy Forum will focus on inviting especially businesses, financiers and youth to pinpoint the potential and the bottlenecks of advising circular solutions. Why is this the focus of this year's forum?
Nadia and Kim, thank you very much. You are, by the way, doing good. Let me first
Thank you.
say thank you everybody for participating to this year's edition of World Circular Economy Forum here in Helsinki. It's also very encouraging to know that there are thousands and thousands of participants online, so welcome you too. So now to your question, why businesses, why youth? First on business, if you think what the circular economy is all about, it's about business. Secondly, it's about market economy. Thirdly, it's about investment. Fourth, it's about financing investment. And fifth, it's about regulation, how to regulate business environment the way which encourages circular business models to thrive. That is the reason why our focus is on industries, businesses, investments, etc. this year. Last year when we were in Kigali in Rwanda, somebody actually hit the bullseye by saying that the discussions around circular economy is still stuck in the future. And that is somewhat worrisome. We tend to think that something should happen in the future, but actually we cannot afford for this. So that's why we need action. And if you want action, we have to talk with the businesses. Second, why youth? Again, last year in Kigali, it was so amazing to see so many young African entrepreneurs who were running profitable circular economy business. They were mostly in the areas of traditional industries. So the only thing what they have changed was the business model. It was much more sustainable. And as we all know, there's young people have a vision, they have energy, they have imaginations, idealism to a certain extent, to change the way we used to think, and that's why youth.
And really important, like what she said about Kigali, what was the message from there, that we are looking at circular economy now, not into the future, but what's happening now, what we need to do now.
Exactly, we have to act now, and this is not just a statement. If looking at what is going on already in the market, there is lots of things, but I believe we will talk about this later.
Absolutely. Well, as a fellow Finn, Jyrki, I need to ask you, why is it so important for a country like Finland to raise a hand and actively take initiatives like organizing this forum?
Well, for me it means to be in the right side of the history. So I strongly believe that the circular economy will be the dominating model of market economy in the years to come, in foreseeable future, and that's why we all have to do something which brings people forward, people and our economy and our societies forward, and that's why circular economy is the answer. I have to tell you a couple of new initiatives, what the Sitra has done. just before this event. The first one is we published a new position paper which could be called like European Green Deal 2.0. It has been published. It's in Sitra's website. You can look at it, and I do hope that you participate to this debate. What the EU should do during the next Commission. There will be European Parliamentary elections next spring. So after that, the new Commission will be formed, and the new Commission have a right and duty to make a new strategy. So that's why the paper is for them, but we need your help to push it forward. The second, today we are launching a call for applications for leading European circular solutions for nature. Europe and world needs inspiring examples of how companies use circular solutions to tackle biodiversity loss while succeeding in their business. We believe that biodiversity loss will be as big an issue as climate change is today within the next 5 years. And that's why we need solutions. Only protection or setting up new conservation areas is not enough. We need business to be involved.
Thank you so much for that strong message. And also for you, why did Nordic Innovation decide to be a co-host of this World Circular Economy Forum?
Nordic Innovation is an organization owned by the 5 Nordic governments through the Nordic Council of Ministers. The Nordic Prime Ministers have formulated a shared vision that the Nordics is to become the most integrated and sustainable region by 2030. Transforming our societies into a circular model is an essential part of this. The World's Overshoot Day is coming earlier every day. Everybody understands that this cannot continue. We need a deep and profound change. I should also add that the Nordics together, we constitute the 11th largest economy globally. This makes us in a position to be frontrunners when it comes to transforming the societies into a sustainable one.
Fantastic, thank you. And obviously today and tomorrow this whole forum is about global collaboration. And when we look at the numbers at this year's forum in terms of diversity, it really goes to show that there's a growing interest towards circular economy and its transition. And actually, when we're looking at the numbers, they're pretty impressive. For example, we have participants from almost 100 countries and speakers from 33 countries here in Helsinki this year. And over 6,000 participants follow the forum online from over 140 countries. So that's a good achievement already. Let's give a round of applause for that. Now, my question to you, gentlemen, is a two-parter. What has been achieved during the past 5 years in the transition to the circular economy? And then secondly, what should happen and is needed during the next 5 years to speed up the change? Would Swain like to start?
I think it's fair to start with emphasizing that today there is 2,408 days until we need to fulfill the targets in the Paris Agreement and also the Biodiversity Agreement. I think that underlines the whole challenge that we are facing. And by bringing thought leaders here together from government, academia, and industry, we are able to have discussions on what to be done and also showcase what can be done to be as an inspiration for the challenges that we need to overcome. This is why also that we are co-hosting this World Economic Circle Forum together with Sitra.
Fantastic. And over to you, Jyrki.
Well, a lot has obviously happened already. I just give you a couple of ideas or anecdotes. There are a number of countries, for instance, Finland, Netherlands, Belgium, and Austria, who have set a specific and absolute target for resource use. This is quite a significant political decision. Secondly, governments worldwide have promoted circular economy by changing the regulations somehow, or then they have increased financing for circular economy business models, etc. Thirdly, there are globally more than 40 countries now who have circular economy roadmaps and strategies, including many countries in Latin America and in African continent. On top of that, more than 50 countries are using circular strategies and their nationally determined contributions in line with Paris Agreement. For instance, in this country, transition is led by industries. Industries are becoming increasingly circular, and the biggest investments are based on this idea. If looking at what the EU has done, because EU is a forerunner in this field, for instance, circular economy of critical raw materials has been accelerated by the EU's battery regulation, which gradually increases the use of recycled materials. In April 2023, this year, Europe's largest battery mineral recycling plant was opened in Harjavalta in Finland. And final example, the separate collection of textile will start in the EU by 2025, which obviously has a significant impact to this business and also to the circularity. And 2 quick points, what should be done next? I would focus on education, because we need new skills when our companies are moving towards circular economy. So we have to pay attention to the skills. The second, we have to look at how we could encourage circular economy by changing the market regulation. Because what I said in the beginning, circular economy is all about market economy. And market economy doesn't have any values, it only has features. So the humankind must give the values to market economy, and that's why we have to look at the market regulatory side too.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, Jyrki Katainen and Svein Berg, for sharing your impactful messages. Let's all give them a round of applause while they go back to their seats.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And all these things that they have shared are something that we're going to talk much more about during the next 2 days. But before we dive into that, we will look back into the last year's World Circular Economy Forum that took place in Kigali, Rwanda. How have things progressed since then, and what kind of lessons can we take from Kigali with us into this year's forum? Please welcome Shendak Muyavamaria, Minister of Environment from Rwanda. Unfortunately, she could not be here with us today because of a catastrophe caused by exceptional heavy rains. But please give her a hand of applause, and then she will be here with us from a video recording. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, friends of the environment. Hello, Helsinki. Greetings from Kigali, Rwanda. It is my great pleasure to join you virtually for the opening of the 2023 World Circular Economy Forum. Last year, Rwanda was honored to host the World Circular Economy Forum in our green capital city, Kigali. Held in the Global South for the first time, last year's forum shone a light on trailblazing circular solutions from Africa and brought together the global circular economy community. Today, that same vibrant and growing community is meeting for this year's forum to showcase how the circular economy can be a solution for our economies and a solution to protect and restore Mother Nature as well. The global circular economy movement is growing. As part of this effort, Rwanda and many countries across Africa are making impressive progress in transitioning to a circular economy. At last year's forum, we launched Rwanda's first ever National Circular Economy Action Plan and the roadmap, and implementation is now underway. Similar stories of acceleration in the circular economy are now commonplace across the continent, in large part due to the work of the World Circular Economy Forum and the African Circular Economy Alliance. These efforts have opened people's eyes to the potential of the circular economy. Today, numerous businesses are engaged in repair and recycling, especially e-waste, and investing in the sharing economy. We also have a matchmaking portal to connect producers and potential users of waste. While I'm disappointed I cannot be with you in person, I have no doubt that this year's forum will build on the outcomes from Kigali and continue to make the promise and potential of the circular economy a reality in all corners of the world. I would like to thank Nordic Innovation, the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, the government of Finland, and all partners for organizing the 2023 World Circular Economy Forum. The forum will provide a unique opportunity to create momentum for a nature-positive future. So let's work together to utilize the circular economy to find solutions to global crises, from climate change and pollution to biodiversity loss. I wish you all the best for a wonderful 2023 World Circular Economy Forum. I thank you.
Thank you so much to Minister Shandak Muyava-Maria for her insightful perspectives and really impactful messages. This is truly a unique opportunity, as she also said. In a European context, the role of the EU is crucial in the current transition from a linear economy towards the circular economy. But what is the status of this transition on the EU level? We are very pleased to have Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Frans Timmermans, joining us through a video link and share his message about this. The floor is Mr. Frans Timmermans.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the circular economy. In the past 200 years, humanity has found unparalleled development on the back of a carbon-based economy. But the linear model of take, make, use, disregard has reached its limits. Growing consumption from a growing global population is pushing us closer and closer to doing irreversible damage to our ecosystems, our economies, and our well-being. In the next 40 years, the use of primary materials is projected to double. Our planet is not able to cope with that if we continue as we do now. We need to develop an economy where products and materials are reused, repaired, and recycled instead of thrown away, where circular business models become mainstream, and where waste from one industrial process becomes a valued input for another. At the European Commission, we walk this path with you. We want to make sustainable and circular products the norm in the EU market. The Eco-Design for Sustainable Products regulation that's currently being negotiated will be at the heart of this change. And by 2030, at least 15% of our annual consumption of critical raw materials should come from recycling. This is all the more urgent due to the volatile prices of raw materials and the supply chain disruptions caused by the pandemic and now Russia's barbaric war. We have to increase our production of recycled materials, but we also need to reduce our resource use altogether. This requires investments in circular business models, sharing economy, reverse logistics, reuse and repair services, or service-based business models. These models are the future. I already see it with my kids. They don't want to own a car, they want mobility. The same can apply to many other products, from toolkits to home appliances. We can also significantly reduce resource use, waste and emissions if we move from single-use to reuse where possible. The revision of the packaging and packaging waste legislation is a first concrete step in that direction. The mandatory reuse and refill targets in that proposal can save resources, lower emissions, and create new jobs. We don't yet know all that can be done at EU level to help circular business models become mainstream, but I challenge everyone here today to make this a priority. The Circular Business Hub will be one useful forum to discuss how to boost these business models and how to make sure they're profitable to businesses and attractive to consumers. A transition to circularity allows us to decouple economic growth from resource use, biodiversity loss, and environmental degradation. The progress in Europe to date makes me convinced that it's possible to stay within planetary boundaries without giving up the comforts of modern life. There are two crucial steps on the immediate horizon. First of all, a swift implementation of the Fit for 55 package with a rapid transition to renewable energy. But we also need to actively restore nature. As today's forum clearly recognizes, climate, biodiversity, and circular economy are tightly linked. So our second step is a swift adoption of the nature restoration law, the bedrock of the European Green Deal's biodiversity pillar. The law sets a common direction of travel for the entire European Union and allows us to follow through on the commitments made by all EU governments last December when we agreed Global Biodiversity Framework in Montreal. At the global level, the importance of the circular economy for reducing emissions and reversing biodiversity loss are understood increasingly well. To build on this momentum, having a UN conference on sustainable consumption and production could help to bring the circular economy to the forefront of the global agenda. Meanwhile, we will continue working with partners in the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. We will keep pushing for an ambitious global plastics agreement, and we will advocate for sustainable and circular economic growth for all in the context of both the G7 and the G20. Amidst all the upheavals today, we need to keep a calm eye at the road ahead and invest in the economy of the future, an economy that is sustainable, resilient, climate neutral, and nature positive. That economy is a circular economy, because a circular economy is good for consumers, it's good for business opportunities, it's good for nature. It's good for our climate policy as well. So it's good for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Mr. Frans Timmermann for these really impactful words. It was so interesting to listen to that. Next, we will explore how sustainable resource management works in creating the future that we want. I will now like to welcome the floor to co-chair of the International Resource Panel, Janis Potočnik, who will join us here on stage. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks. Hi, friends. Let me start with some good news. CITRA and International Resource Panel are becoming strategic partners. This means that IRP is also officially becoming a scientific backbone of the World Circular Economic Forum, which is due to the substance we are covering, useful, logical, and needed. According to our science, resource use is at the roots of a triple planetary crisis, and the trends are alarming. Resource use harbors deep inequalities. High-income countries have benefited most and have driven the planetary crisis, while emerging and developing countries hold least responsibility and are facing worst impacts. The central question we should ask is, how do we meet human needs and maximize our well-being in the most energy and resource efficient way? For that, and this is the point frequently repeated by the IRP, we would need to decouple our economic growth and well-being from the natural resource use and environmental impacts. Circular economy should be seen as an efficient instrument for delivering decoupling in practice. as well as part of the bigger picture of economic, societal, and cultural transformation needed to deliver European Green Deal and Sustainable Development Goals. This clearly defines the critical role of the Forum. In our efforts related to critical challenges, 3 major blind spots could be identified. First, the lack of holistic system change approach, silo logic, and the lack of capacity or knowledge how to translate system change visions into concrete policies and investments results in conflicting actions and policies that hinder the real system transformation. Second, by failing to go to the roots of the problem, addressing the fundamental drivers and pressures, we lack focus on natural resource use, as well as market signals leading consumers and producers' behavior. Our current system does not incentivize sustainable resource use. In fact, quite the opposite. And third, lack of demand-side focus. Policy attention, also in climate efforts, is mainly given to the supply side of the economy, to the cleaning of the existing economic system. It is lacking attention to the demand side. We must stop ignoring the inherent wastefulness of our production and consumption systems and ask the question, who is exceeding the planetary boundaries and living out of the safe operating space? Efficiency should thus be complemented with the sufficiency policies. Which leads me to the solutions and necessary steps incorporated in the incoming IRP Global Resource Outlook 2024. Let me share major novelties we will introduce. First, we will be looking at resource use through provisioning systems delivering essential human needs, food and nutrition, mobility, the built environment, water and sanitation, and energy. We must shift away from the prevailing resource wasteful economic approach based on maximizing the output of the sectors, defined by GDP, towards an economy that is efficiently meeting human needs and it's optimizing human well-being. The current logic is both ethically and ecologically unsustainable. This would also allow and incentivize the cross-sector innovation and shifts to a more future-fit business models. Second, we will complement supply with demand side and connect resource use more to equity and justice implications. In high-income countries, absolute decoupling should be the aim, whereas in low and some middle-income countries, where additional resource use is still needed to meet people's basic well-being needs, we should aim at relative decoupling. Third, modeling scenarios will capture the system change dimension. It will explore a sustainable path for global resource use if we would do a systemic shift to our provisioning systems from both a supply and demand side perspective. And finally, fourth, responses chapter will call for a need of a multilateral alignment on how to institutionalize resource use in our systems of governance, finance, trade, and across businesses. We should acknowledge the resource-specific implications of existing governance arrangements and targets. We should internalize hidden costs into resource pricing, use public money for public interest, stop subsidizing unsustainable resource use, incorporate resource risks and dependency into regulation of private finance and central bank mandates. We should incorporate the impact of resource use into trade agreements, border adjustment taxes, and mandatory due diligence to enable producer countries to capture a larger share of resource value. And we should reorganize production to use less energy and resources, invest and monitor effectiveness of circular business models based on everything as a service and extended producer responsibility. To conclude, trying to maintain the current economic system and at the same time fixing the chronic triple planetary crisis is not consistent and creates a lot of confusion and lobbying. Few basic shifts are needed. First, we must shift away from prevailing economic logic, which puts humans in function of economic growth, towards an economy that is efficiently meeting human needs. We must set the order right. Second, we need to move from an economy considering humans as external and superior to nature, to an economy acknowledging that we are embedded with nature. Destroying nature is destroying ourselves. Third, we need to move from an extraction-based production to a circular creation-based production. We should stop stimulating extraction-based economic success and rather reward responsible, innovative, creative ways of meeting human needs. And finally, we must fix our governance structures and make them fit for purpose. Long-term sovereignty can only be protected through genuine, deep cooperation with the institutional reforms to match. Dear friends, access to and use of natural resources, land, water, oil and gas, minerals, or precious metals, have been in the human history always closely related to the level of well-being achieved by nations, also to the stability, security, conflicts, wars. The whole history of the colonialization of nature was central also to the fairness and equity. Lessons learned recently from the terrible war, pandemic, the hottest summer since we started to record the temperature, are more than convincing to understand that changing our relationship with nature is ultimately not only environmental, but also economic, equality, security, resilience imperative. This relationship is not stable, nor balanced, and it will be resolved either with collective wisdom and effort or in a hard and painful way, through conflicts, hunger, pandemics, migration. This is the choice we have. And this is the real question behind the sustainability efforts. I hope that that will be recognized also when designing the follow-up of the European Green Deal vision. The future will be circular, the future will be green, or there will be no future. Thank you.
Thank you, Janec Potocnik, for the clear and sobering messages that you brought to us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it's time we have a very information-packed, tight first plenary, and now it's time to elaborate on the main themes of this first plenary with our panel discussion. So can I ask our respective panelists to come on stage with us, and we can get going with our first panel discussion. Do we want to take on this side of the table? First of all, we have Roberto Franchitti, Executive Vice President at Tetra Pak Services. His team of almost 5,000 highly trained employees is uniquely positioned to make a positive impact in the global food industry. Roberto's focus is on transforming the industry, modernizing and optimizing production operations.
And to discuss with him, we have Valerie Hickey, who is Global Director of Environment for Natural Resources and the Blue Economy. In the World Bank, she oversees the implementation of commitments on climate change, mainstreaming and finance. She has also worked in Latin America and Caribbean, supporting communities on climate change. Welcome, Valerie Hickey.
Patience Mofu is the CEO of Inside Mining Experts. Patience is a mining executive with over 2 decades of experience in the mining industry. She's an IWF fellow, a global speaker, and has published in over 10 international journals. She was named as one of the most influential women in mining. Welcome very much, Patience.
And next we have Ilkka Hamala, who is President and CEO of Metsä Group. He's also Chairman of the Confederation of European Paper Industries and a member of CEPI Board and Steering Committee. Lastly, Hamala is also Vice Chairman of the Finnish Forest Industries Federation.
Well, last but not least, we have Andrei Kusvik. He's the President and CEO of Nordic Investment Bank, an international financial institution of the Nordic and Baltic countries, with a responsibility for strategy, operations, and managing assets. Andrei Kusvik has served on the boards of over 30 banks, insurance companies, stock exchanges, equity funds, and large infrastructure companies. Welcome.
It's truly great to have you all with us here today. And now we will have a round of yes and no questions. And I know that's really mean, and I know you all really like to talk, so this is going to be a really difficult challenge for all of you. But the question goes, is it possible to have an industrial system that is regenerative by intention and design? We will start with Valerie Higri. Yes or no?
Yes, a resounding yes.
Lovely. Andrei Kusvik. Yes or no?
Yes, and the only option.
Lovely. Ilkka Hamala.
Yes.
Wow, I see we have a pattern here. And Patience Mapufu, yes or no?
Absolutely yes.
Ooh, really interesting what we're getting now. So, Roberto Franchetti, what are you going to say?
No pressure.
No, I think it is possible, yes.
Okay.
So our panel is unanimous in the thinking. Right, so we've got about 5 minutes time to elaborate on your stance on this. So let's try to keep the answers short and sweet so as many of you can answer. Valerie, do you want to start by saying why did you say yes?
So I said yes, not just because it would be nice to have, but because it's an absolute must-have. We're living in a world, we heard it from the speeches this morning, you all know it, where primary resources are getting more scarce, overall goods and services are less affordable, governments are in debt crisis. So circularity is not just a nice to have, it's an absolute must-have, because at the end of the day, it's an efficiency and an affordability agenda.
Thank you. And Patience?
Absolutely. It's not only possible about the possibility, it's about the importance. I mean, if you think about the current challenges that we're facing of climate change, and we are on a journey of transitioning to a net zero by 2050, how is the future going to look like? The industrial systems at this point in time are outdated, and we need to start thinking differently. And that is why it's important for us to start thinking of industrial systems that are by design regenerative.
Great, thank you, and very good and succinct answers. Thanks very much. Ilkka.
So, as mentioned here during the speeches, so the growth, the global growth comes from growth of population and developing countries, economies developing quite fast, and that's why we in the industry should not be supporting each individual's consuming more, but thinking how can we fulfill the day-to-day needs of each people globally with as small resource use as possible, and we must look it throughout our value chain.
Great, thank you very much. Andrei, over to you.
I would say mostly because it makes sense. We operate, this is the only planet we have, so we operate a defined resource. I used to be an engineer before I became a banker, and I also would like to say that there are very few things which are impossible. Mm-hmm. Certain things might take time, but if it makes sense, it will happen.
Fantastic.
Wonderful.
And Roberto?
Well, I think the issue with regenerative is we have to define exactly what we're after, because there is no perpetual motion, there's no endless recycling of energy, and you can maintain a system non-stop. So I think it is possible, but we need to define what we're after, the boundaries and what the objectives are, and then of course we can definitely deliver regenerative manufacturing and systems, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. you managed that really well, even though the question was large and your answers were brief. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and that was really something that at least gives me hope with those really strong messages. And now we have another really difficult task for you, which is really that a lot of you have prepared a 3-minute speech on how you see some suggestions on circular solutions for nature and the economy. And we will start with Roberto Fanchitti from Tetra Pak, who will share his perspective from a business sector point of view.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to actually thank Citra and the organising committee for putting together this extremely important group of people and giving me the opportunity to talk about something that really I take very seriously. Now, I'm hoping that I can share the way that we do things in Tetra Pak and in a way to inspire other companies. And first, I should put things into context. So you see that I work for Tetra Pak. We have our mission, which is to make food safe and available everywhere. We have a food processing and packaging system which allows food to be distributed in very long distances with no cold chain. You have an extended shelf life, which means less spoilage, less food waste. And we are really working very hard every day to live by this ambition and this purpose. We also have a motto, which is protects what's good, and that extends to the stewardship of food, people, and the planet. And the reason I put this first is to explain that this guides us every day in the way that we work, in the way that we run our business. It's kind of due north, if you like, that all of our employees can get around and work towards. Now, how does that come to life in reality? Now, we have 3 business units in Tetra Pak. We have the packaging business, we have the equipment sales business, and then we have services, which is the business that I look after. You can consider it to be kind of after sales, if you like. So we go in and we maintain customers' equipment. And the beauty of my business is that it is entirely based on sustainability and circularity principles. So we, of course, you can imagine, have traditional service operations where we provide spare parts, we provide maintenance. But around 15 years ago, we started to expand our service offer into expert services. We can do sophisticated computer modeling of our customers' operations. We can help them optimize their production, reduce waste, reduce food waste, reduce energy consumption, increase productivity, improve output. And we do these things not because we want to brag about it or we want to be smug, but because it's the right thing to do and it really generates a really great business. We also will buy back customers' second-hand equipment and refurbish it and sell it again as a certified refurbished equipment. This might seem counterintuitive because in a way a lot of businesses would think, let's sell a new piece of equipment. Why would you refurbish an old piece of equipment? But it's the right thing to do. And why would you just use and throw away when you can repair and reuse? And we have equipment that's out there that's 40, even in some cases 50 years old. And we take this very, very seriously. So I think overall our services operations, our service business is very profitable and it's growing very well. But that shows that you can have a very circular, very sustainable business that is also a successful business by the traditional metrics. And I really hope that this can inspire people to really think in a different way. You don't have to have a linear economy where it's use, throw away, tear out the lines, scrap them, landfill, and you just put new equipment out there. So hopefully this is something that can inspire other companies to think in a similar way. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And maybe just as a follow-up to you, can you maybe elaborate a bit on some of the success factors to really achieve all the good things that you mentioned, which is needed on the way to a circular economy?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the world is very competitive from a business perspective. Our customers are competing for business, and if you're packing a carton of milk, fractions of a cent make a difference. So the equipment that they have in their production facility has to be very competitive. And so we actually offer rebuilding kits so that they can upgrade their equipment without having to reinstall completely new equipment to bring it up to the latest standards. We can help customers to change the format, change the product. Once the line was originally installed, it was to pack a certain format. We can help them rebuild. So I think the key is to really make sure that you're helping your customers to stay competitive, to have the right product. And I think, you can't decouple the sustainability and circularity from business success. You have to try to find a way that the two things merge and are supporting each other. Yeah, I think that's a key success factor.
Fantastic, thank you. Great, let's move on to our next speaker to share her thoughts on circular solutions for nature and our economy. From the banking sector point of view, Valerie Hickey from Natural Resources and the Blue Economy, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. And I have to agree with Roberto that we cannot decouple business success from the failure of the linear economy. For us at the World Bank, our business is ending poverty. We're committed to end extreme poverty by 2030, and we are desperately failing at doing that. We live in a world today where there's 828 million people who are going to go to bed hungry tonight. That number was 690 million people 8 years ago. The number is getting worse, getting more, not getting less. Our business is failing. It's because the linear economy is failing people. It's simply not delivering for everybody. And moreover, after the last 3 years of COVID, of worsening climate change, and of worsening conflict, we're in a doom and gloom loop that we have to get out of. And that's the promise of circular economy. It's an agenda of opportunity. It's an agenda that can help us as a business, as a non-profit business, to end poverty, to put people back at the heart of the conversation around growth, put people back at the heart of the economy, so that a functioning economy works for everybody. It doesn't just work for consumers of products, it works for the people who live in those places where those resources are mined. One of the poorest places on earth, one of the most polluted places on earth, is in Kabwe. It's a community about 100 kilometers north of Lusaka in Zambia. This is a place where copper was mined for a long time, and it was mined in a way that has poisoned the landscape and poisoned the people. A healthy amount of lead in the blood is 0, but the World Health Organization says up to about 5 milliliters of copper per deciliter of blood is okay, of lead, in blood is okay. In Kabwe, it's 150. Think about what that means for children and for the next generation. This isn't just people sick today, it's generations who are going to be sick. It's people who will never be productive, who will never be healthy, who can never be successful. That's what the linear economy has done. So as an MDB, a multilateral development bank, we see our roles to help us move to a circular economy in 3 places. First is upstream. One of our jobs is to help governments think about policies and pricing. And these are the 2 things that we need to change. In terms of policy, it's not just having circular economy policies and having big ambition. It's about making sure that every policy runs through a filter that tells the government and tells their citizens, what's that policy's impact going to be on the environment? Yes. But more importantly, what's the impact going to be on jobs? And what's the impact going to be on revenues? Revenues at the household level, at the firm level, and at government level, that matters. And then, of course, pricing matters. And pricing has never mattered more than it does today when we're all living in a cost of living crisis, when governments are living through debt crises. And we live in a world where pricing doesn't work. Just think about plastics. I just came here from the second round of negotiations that are underway to design a new plastics pollution treaty. And one of the things everybody keeps reminding us is that today the price of virgin plastic is less expensive than the price of recycled plastic. And this is for a good of which there's about 460 million tons of plastic produced every year, 460 million tons, of which 353 million tons are thrown away every year. Think about that. And yet, it's cheaper to keep mining more of it and producing more of it than it is to do recycle. So we have to fix the externality that have led to that pricing differential. The fact that those companies who are producing plastic don't have to include in their price the social costs that producing it creates. But we also can't just work upstream, we also have to work on improving the usage of materials, because the circular economy isn't just about working upstream, it's about improving usage of materials, and that means making sure that micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, who are the engine of economies, can have circular economy business models, can be supported and financed, and that means working with local banks to help them understand how to do it, help them de-risk working in this sector, and then finally we have to work downstream as well. We cannot recycle our way out of the linear economy. But there will always be waste, so we have to figure out better financial models for solid waste management, so that solid waste management does not make cities go bankrupt, and it doesn't make people give up on their governments, because if there's one thing we expect from our governments, it's their ability to collect trash. If they can't do that without going bankrupt, then we're going to lose that social contract.
Thank you, Valerie. That was a strong case built around the main sentence. The linear economy is failing people, as you said. To follow up on your strong speech, would you mind elaborating what is the role of a bank in funding a circular transition, and secondly, the bank's role in creation of deeper understanding of the value of natural capital?
For us, one of the big failures in policy and pricing has long been the reality that natural capital, nature in all its forms, is allowed to be degraded as the price of the linear economy. And the cost of doing so is not taken into account on the balance sheet. And so we've spent a lot of time working through models, including with the UN Statistics Division and the UN System of Environmental and Economic Accounts, to create a way to make sure that natural capital is brought onto the balance sheets of governments and onto the balance sheet of companies. Because it's important that everybody recognizes not just that natural capital is an opportunity that can be used and produced, but that it's a risk, not just for the society who has to live with the degraded landscapes when natural capital is degraded and destroyed, but it's a risk to the businesses themselves, it's a risk to the government themselves when they lose an asset, when an asset is liquidated without a corresponding social benefit. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to make natural capital accounting boring again, to make it part of the everyday business cycle and the everyday government accounting cycle.
Thank you so much, Valerie Hickey, for that really strong message. So I love how glad everyone is for clapping. I really like that as well. And now we will explore the circular economy from the mining perspectives, and I'm really happy to give the floor to Patience Mapofu from Insight's Mining Experts. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kimo and Nadia, for this opportunity, and the organizers. I'm often asked by a lot of people, why have you stayed more than 2 decades in the mining industry? And I will tell you what, the mining industry is so important. It's at the center of human development. Think about this. The materials that are produced by the mining industry, critical minerals, the cell phone that you're holding, it has got batteries. What's inside the battery? It's a critical mineral. It may be lithium, even in electric cars that we're using. Think about decarbonization that we're talking about, the transition to net zero. We need critical minerals. So in short, the mining industry is at the heart of what we're trying to solve. It's important for people to recognize that. However, for us to produce that 4 grams, we need to generate waste of about 1 ton of waste. And this is like in the platinum industry. This is where I've actually worked. You need 4 grams. That's what you're looking for when you're exploring. When you start mining, it's 4 grams. The reef is very small. Then you've got all this waste that comes out. You need to process this material. What are you going to need? You will need more water. You will need electricity. You will need land to dispose the tailings. And by the way, that was my PhD, to recycle the water back into the operations from the tailings dams. Is it enough? So there's so much waste that also comes with the very critical mineral that we need for the journey to decarbonization. So there is a tension, and this is where the circular economy business model comes into play. To help us start with the inefficiencies that we have in our process operations, we need to move away from the linear model, which is non-regenerative, to a circular business model. Think about this. If we were to redesign a new mine of the future, how does it look like? Is it possible for us to be able to track that metal, produce that metal with minimal waste? Be able to recycle that metal, that lithium that we need for the batteries, that lithium, that cobalt that we need for the electric cars? Are we able to bring it back into the process operation? There are many inefficiencies, even in terms of capacity. So by the way, I also worked across the value chain of the mining industry. I worked in the processing industry, right? You use less capacity in the process, in the mining processing side of mining. Can we be able to break barriers and utilize more capacity? Because if you're going to be utilizing only 40% of your processing capacity, you're utilizing more electricity. Are you able to collaborate, break those barriers? This is where technology comes in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patient Mapofu, for that really strong message. Let's give him a hand. You've already touched a bit about it, but can you maybe elaborate a bit on the major inefficiency and waste generators in the linear value chain of mining, and also talk a bit about what role does technology play in really combating this as well?
Thank you, Nadia. So as I already mentioned in terms of what you actually need, which is the 4 grams in the mine, because that's the critical mineral we need, you generate a lot of waste. How can you actually ensure that this waste is rehabilitated? Because remember, you use a lot of land, especially if it's open cast mining. How can you ensure that it's more regenerative? This is where the circular business model comes into play. When you talk about water that you use, are we able to recycle more of the water? It's still very inefficient. And I think there's a lot of opportunities, which brings me to technology. The role of technology, I will emphasize, innovation is at the center of implementing circular economy business model in the mining industry. Is the mining industry doing something? Of course they are. From exploration, using artificial intelligence, from using remote sensors. All these is actually coming to play, from improving the efficiencies, particularly of recycling all these metals that we need. Technology is at the center. And I believe that if we are to use technology, R&D, government, industry, working together to finance, especially the research and development or technology companies, I think we'll be able to implement circular economy business models faster than we actually can think. So that's my take on that.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, dear panelists, because it did so well in the first round of yes or no answers, we'll have another common question for you all to answer. And here it goes. Can we get better in demystifying financing a circular economy? Andrei, would you like to start?
Well, I don't think there is necessarily something very mystical about financing. I genuinely believe that the success depends on mostly 2 factors. One is incentives, the other one is institutions. And banks, of course, that are the key financing agents in any economy, they can be those institutions. But they can't do it alone. So there have to be policies, there would have to be consumer demand, there would have to be entrepreneurs that they put money in line, and then the banks can leverage and make it bigger.
So you already broke the myth around the question that there isn't mystic around financing circular economy. What do you think, Ilkka?
I share Andrew's view, so there is not mystic, but maybe there is need of more precise definitions, so then defining the criteria between the financier and the investors, so that we are speaking the same language and we can direct the investment in the right decision what the finance sector needs.
So there is still that problem of communication between sexes?
Problem of communication, because this world is developing so fast, and this sort of, for example, this regenerative business concept, what does it mean? So definitions are not there.
Thank you. Roberto, you were nodding there to Ilkka's comments.
I think, in terms, I don't think there's anything, as an engineer, to me, finance is fairly straightforward. You have a proposition, you make an investment, there is a return, an ambition of a return. And I think part of the problem with circularity, is what is the return? They can't always be economic directly. You have to sometimes initiate the process. So I think, if we could all align around the language, what is the expected return, then I think things will start to open up, and it will just become more natural to access capital. So.
And then to Valerie, from the financing point of view, are you also going to throw this question out of the window?
No, I actually think if you asked all 5 of us sitting on this stage to define circular economy, you'd get 5 different definitions. So I do think we need to demystify, and I think that's the importance of this event, that we're all coming together and having that conversation. And I think at the end of the day, metrics move markets, including financial markets. And that if we don't have a way to measure what the expected returns are, as Roberto said, then we're not going to be able to put the finance where it needs to go.
Yeah. What about patience?
So I think in terms of finance, and I would refer also to the mining industry, you've got to really have a business case. That's the question that you're going to be asked by the leaders. What is the business case for this, right? And for me, I find that we don't have what I would call role models. Do we have a successful circular economy, fully circular economy business model, especially in the mining industry, that we can say, this is what we have? And I think that's essentially what I would like to see, a case study, because that's going to help and encourage other people. Because leaders, they are also measured on the return on investment. I mean, I wear my commercial hat, and the first thing I asked was the return on investment here. But I think we have not explored that further, and I think it needs to be explored. We need education. We need to be able to share information and see how other industries have done it. And I'm inspired by the industry that Roberto is in, because it makes sense.
Fantastic. This mystic question brought up some really good answers from you. Thank you very much for those. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists at this stage. Right, let's move on. Next for 3 minutes speech is Ilkka Hämälä from Metsä Group. Over to you.
Thank you. So, when deciding a business and to meet the targets of circularity and regenerative business model, so basically you should be able to look through whole value chain. Our group is producing products from Nordic forests. So we are operating in natural forests which are in economical use. And the end point is on global consumers, global people utilizing our products. And then you have several steps in between. Part of the products we are producing ourselves direct to market, part of we have then supplying industrial raw materials, like for example here we have an example in value chain. So basically you should be analyzing, so how can you meet your basic targets? To make a decision that, okay, we are practicing circular economy, we are practicing bioeconomy, we are sustainable, we are trying to find ways to do regenerative business. And then to look all segments, what can we do? For example, if you think this kind of a wooden product, so basically how should you start thinking about this? First, we must have a long life cycle. That is to save resources. We must maybe repurpose it on some stage of its life cycle. We must be able to recycle its materials. And then when we have been producing this, we must in every step use as low amount of resources as possible. And then when we come to the forest, which is a very important topic in the discussion today. So we have to be able to fulfill all the requirements set to the forest. Economical use, biodiversity, recreational use, climate change mitigation. And for this, we need sort of a very ambitious target setting. Like for example, our group has now made a decision so that by 2030, we should be able to do regenerative forestry. So meaning, in those forests where we are operating, the status of the ecology is better after our operations than before. And it needs huge amount of different measures you practically have to be doing there, and then also indicators, are we moving in the right direction? And this has to be communicated and accepted throughout the value chain all the way to the end consumer. And then we can say, if we succeed in this, so that we are sustainable, we are supporting the circular economy.
Thank you very much. Like you brought up there, Ilkka, there are many criteria, and Valerie was talking about who is defining what circular economy is, or the transition into that, what is required, and I really appreciate your valuable input on these topical questions. But just to follow up, Ilkka, on your excellent points there, and I put this a bit poetically here. An ideal circular economy is inspired by nature and is in harmony with it. This sounds brilliant. But how do Metsä Group apply principles of circular economy and regenerative practices in your day-to-day life?
Well, like I mentioned, in forestry is sort of a natural as we are working in a natural environment. But then when we go into industrial operations, it becomes more challenging, and the traditional view has been so that we are minimizing the damage. And now we should be changing it into giving the positive impact. That's why, for example, we have started to go through our industrial sites, which we have about 30 all around Europe, and change the land use inside our industrial areas so that they are supporting biodiversity. But you must look each sector and think, how can you change the practices and to be supporting this regenerative idea.
So there has to be almost like a 360 consideration to the whole sector around it and in the transition. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ilkka Hämälä from Metsä Group.
And now it's time for our last, but definitely not least, our 3-minute speech by Endre Kysvek from the Nordic Investment Bank. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I think it's symbolic that we are holding this World Circular Economic Forum in Finland, a country where nature means a great deal and where the whole everyday life is actually intertwined with nature. It's really everywhere around you. The Nordic Investment Bank is owned by 8 Nordic and Baltic countries. And as a bank owned by governments, we have long held the belief that we need to add value and take certain risks slightly differently, similarly to the other international financial institutions like the World Bank and many others. And we strongly believe that banks are not only about financing. So if you go around and ask a person on the street, look, what banks do? Banks give loans. But I think there is a lot more than the money that is being put on the table. I think we should not underestimate the expertise and know-how in the banks. The ability to do a due diligence, not only financial, but also economic, technical, legal, and finally environmental. The Nordic Investment Bank has for longer than a decade been issuing green bonds, and the environmental protection is one of our 2 core purpose or mandate elements. The other one is productivity. And I strongly believe that the 2 are increasingly converging, because I strongly believe that the solution to a more circular economy is actually in technology. And therefore, by supporting productivity and supporting research and development, supporting innovation, really pushing the envelope to kind of new solutions that hopefully are better than the previous ones, can also be used for, valuing more the environment and the nature and making sure that we use our resources efficiently So it's not, as Mr. Timmermans said, just the take, make, use, and disregard, but it is something where we see, look, it's really needs to be not only neutral but nature positive, I think, in the end. So therefore, I think a big question is whether we actually value the nature in our sustainable financing sufficiently. I mentioned earlier in the question that it's the incentives and the institutions that drive success. The incentives also include, look, how do we really value our nature? Can we put a price tag on it somehow in really expressed in monetary terms? And I think that is something that a discussion should really take place between governments, think tanks, but also banks and entrepreneurs to come up with, look, how do we really price it? Now we have a price for the CO2, and that is actually one of the incentives that is driving the markets in the longer run. Shall we do that on a much broader scale for nature as a whole? From a banking perspective, I do believe that the banks are in a position to try to select the projects and kind of structure them in a way that makes sense. And as I said earlier, also certain things take a little bit longer, but if you push and have a long-term vision on things, then you will eventually get there. So we need to think how we mitigate certain risks. And of course, there are many different pockets, the big money that sits in sovereign wealth funds or pension funds. Some of it is more risk averse than some other pockets. The banks will always finance projects that make sense and promise a repayment at the end of the cycle. Certain projects can be financed on a project finance basis, i.e. that the cash flows from the very project itself will repay the loan. But a lot of it, I guess, need to be financed through traditional, conventional corporate loans, where the corporates are changing and the banks are helping them to change, both in terms of being the second pair of eyes on every project, but also I think there is this broader societal demand for more responsive behavior, and that is eventually driving both the consumers and the investors. Corporates follow and the banks help.
Thank you so much, Endre Kruiswijk, for that really strong message, and really also for those really progressive ideas in regards to valuing nature, and the points about technology also really speaks well towards the other points we've already talked about. As a really brief follow-up, it would be really great if you can shortly talk about how finance and banking tools can be used to support the regeneration of our economies and ecological systems, and not just support short-term financial gains.
Well, it's all about taking a long-term view, I think. In a short run, we can take, as banks, certain risks in the books. We need to recognize that not every single project might work out, but we need to have an aggregate, and that's what banks do. They aggregate risks and help to therefore diversify some of these. In a longer run, we believe that our strong commitment, but also our internal expertise, both within the Nordic Investment Bank, but also the banking community as a whole, is going to help us to take us to the right point.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Unfortunately, this is all we have time for now. It's been great to have you here all together, and obviously time was of essence, but you managed it really well with these difficult but really important questions. So thank you very much for all of you for coming here.
Thank you so much, and you can return to your seats. It was really interesting to hear your wonderful messages, and I can truly say that this has given us food for thought. And also talking about food, then we will soon have the lunch buffet, which I've personally been looking forward to, and networking break until 1:30 by the Northern Light stage. Please enjoy, and please arrive on time for the next parallel sessions. Many thanks.
Thank you.